Arizona Territory, 1881. The canyon wind carried the sound of a woman's weeping. Gareth Rowley pulled his horse to a halt, heart thudding as he scanned the red cliffs rising high on either side. He had been riding hard since sunrise, dust crusted on his boots, sweat drying on his back. He did not expect to find anyone out here, especially not someone crying. He dismounted, tying the reins loosely to a scrub juniper. The canyon narrowed ahead, shadows growing deeper with each step he took. That was when he saw her. She sat at the edge of a shallow stream, her dress torn at the hem, her dark hair tangled, face streaked with dirt and tears. A worn rifle lay beside her, untouched. Her boots were soaked through. Gareth froze. "Ma'am?" She flinched, then looked up. Her eyes were sharp and wary. "Do not come closer." "I will not," he said, holding both hands out. "Just heard someone crying. Thought maybe someone needed help." "I do not," she said quickly. "It is too late." He studied her a moment, then said softly, "Not for you." She stared at him, lips parted slightly. Then she looked away, pulling her knees up to her chest. "My name is Gareth Rowley," he said. "I am passing through from Prescott. Was not planning to ride into this canyon, but something pulled me in. Maybe it was you." She swallowed. "You should go." "What is your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "Persephone Wren." "That is a strong name." She gave a tired laugh. "Feels like all the strength's gone now." He took a careful step forward. "You hurt." "No," she said. "Not like that." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. Gareth saw her hand tremble. She looked down at it but did not show him. "They were my children," she said. "Two of them. Samuel and Sadie. My husband walked out last spring. Said he was chasing gold. Left me with debts and no land. I try to keep them fed. I did everything her voice cracked. Gareth waited. Last week, a man from the next town over came with a wagon. Said he had a place for them. Said they would be better off. I did not want to let them go, but they were hungry, and I could not." She broke off, covering her face. Gareth lowered himself to the ground across from her, careful not to crowd her. "You gave them a chance. That is not weakness." "I did not even get to say goodbye," she whispered. "I tried to catch up, but they were gone. Just gone." The canyon fell quiet except for the soft splash of water on stone. "No one came after me," she added after a while. "Not even the neighbor lady. I guess I am not worth looking for." Gareth shook his head. "That is not true." She looked at him again, eyes rimmed red. "Why are you still here?" "Because something told me you needed someone to stay." She did not answer, but her shoulders slumped and her gaze dropped to the stream. "Let me help you out of here," he said. "You should not be alone. There is nowhere to go." "I have a place outside of Jerome," he said. "Old ranch, but it is sturdy. You can rest there. Think things through." She looked at him long and hard, searching for a lie. "I am not asking anything of you," Gareth said. "I have been alone a long time too." Persephone's fingers tightened around the photograph. Finally, she nodded once. He stood and walked back to his horse, untying the reins and leading the animal beside her. She rose slowly, brushing dust from her dress. Gareth reached out a hand. She hesitated, then took it. Her fingers were cold. They rode in silence for a while, the sun dipping low behind the canyon rim. Gareth watched her from the corner of his eye. She sat stiff in the saddle, jaw clenched, her gaze fixed ahead. By the time they reached the mouth of the canyon, the sky had turned orange and purple. Gareth guided them toward a small camp he had set up earlier, just past a line of cottonwoods. He dismounted and helped her down. She winced as her boots hit the ground. "Sit," he said, pointing to a flat rock near the fire ring. "I will get supper started. I can help." "No need," he said. "You rest." Persephone sat slowly, her hands folded in her lap. She watched him work in silence as he built a fire and warmed beans and jerky. When he handed her a tin plate, she took it without a word. They ate quietly, the fire crackling between them. After a long pause, she said, "You do not look like a rancher." He chuckled. "What do I look like then?" "Someone with ghosts." He met her eyes. "I have a few." "You lose someone?" "My brother," he said. 6 years back. Shot in a card game in Tucson.
I was supposed to meet him that night.
I was late. She nodded slowly. "I am sorry."
Me too, Gareth said.
"But I am still here." Persephone stared into the flames. "I do not know how to be anymore." "You do not have to know tonight." She looked at him again, and something in her face softened. Later, when the fire burned low, Gareth offered her his bedroll. "I will take first watch," he said.
"Why?"
"Because you deserve to feel safe again." She did not speak, just laid down slowly and pulled the blanket over her shoulders. Her back was to him, but he heard her whisper, "Thank you." He sat beside the fire, rifle across his lap, watching the stars rise. Somewhere in the dark, he thought of the way her hand had felt in his. Cold, yes, but not lifeless. Not too late. The wind shifted east at sunrise, bringing a sharpness to the air that hinted at higher ground ahead. Persephone stood near the ashes of the fire, arms crossed, eyes drawn to the pale rim of sky where the first light bled through the cottonwood branches. The night had been quiet. She had not spoken again after lying down, and Gareth had not tried to make her. Now her voice came low. "How far is your place?" "Day and a half, maybe less if we push." Gareth cinched his saddlebag tighter. "But there's a creek runs close by. We'll stop there before nightfall. Let the horses rest." She nodded once, then bent to rinse her hands in the stream. The gesture was slow, deliberate, the same way someone might touch something they used to know. As they rode, the land gradually lifted into oak-covered slopes. The trail narrowed, pinched between rock outcrops and dry gullies. Gareth kept one eye on the ridgeline, the other on Persephone's posture. She rode stiffly, like the saddle didn't belong to her. At midday, they paused beneath a stunted cottonwood. He handed her a strip of dried meat and a chunk of bread. She tore a corner from the bread, then glanced sideways. "Why'd you stay in Arizona?" "Didn't care for the East," he said. "Too many people asking questions they don't want answered. Out here, the land listens better than most folks." She chewed in silence, then asked, "You ever marry?" "No," she didn't press. Gareth was grateful. They rode again in the heat of early afternoon. The trail twisted through a shallow ravine where the shadows held longer. A jackrabbit darted across their path, and both horses startled, then settled. Persephone didn't speak, but her shoulders heaved once like she'd drawn breath too fast. When they reached the creek by sundown, Gareth dismounted and led his horse to the bank. Persephone followed, rubbing her mount's neck, fingers moving slow and steady now. He watched her from the corner of his eye. She had rolled up her sleeves, her forearms were lean, sun-darkened, lined faintly with old scars. "You work with tools?" he asked as he unpacked the cooking tin. Her brow lifted slightly. "I built most of what stood on our land. Coop, fence, smokehouse. Only thing I couldn't figure was the well pump." Gareth smiled faintly. "I could use someone who knows their way around lumber." She looked at him directly. "You offering me work?" "I'm offering you a place to breathe." She didn't answer, but her gaze lingered longer this time. Later, as the fire crackled low and the sky turned velvet dark, Persephone sat with her knees drawn up, staring into the trees. Gareth sipped coffee, letting the silence stretch. Then she said, "I used to be good at remembering things." The sound of Sadie humming while she shelled peas. The way Samuel's feet hit the floor in the morning, always running. He didn't move. "But lately," she went on, "I try to bring their faces to mind, and it's like trying to hold smoke. I hate that most of all. Gareth leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You're still carrying them. Doesn't matter if the picture's clear. She swallowed hard, but didn't look away. After a long moment, she asked, What about you? That ranch of yours, is it truly yours? Bought it after my brother passed. Took me 3 years to pay the deed off. Is it quiet? Most days. She nodded, slowly. He added, There's a bell on the front gate. Rusted some, but it rings fine when the wind hits it right. That made her smile, just barely. I don't know if I believe in quiet anymore. You will. The fire popped between them. She let that settle, then eased back, lying on her side with her back to the flames. Gareth didn't press her for anything more. The moon came up late, casting pale light over the brush and the slow-moving creek. Gareth kept watch again, one hand resting on his rifle, the other near the coffee tin cooling in the dirt. Persephone's breathing was even now.
Steady.
The canyon was far behind them, but he could still hear the echo of her voice there. It's too late. He looked toward the dark line of the mountains they'd reach by midday tomorrow. Not for you. He didn't say it again, but it stayed with him, like a promise not yet spoken aloud. By late morning, the trail wound into pine-shadowed hills. Damp earth muffled the horses' steps, and needles lay thick over the ground. The air was cooler here, touched by altitude, and Persephone rode with her collar fastened high. She didn't speak, but her gaze moved more freely now to the trees, the slope of the land, the narrow game tracks that crossed their path. When Gareth pointed toward a line of fencing half swallowed by underbrush, she nodded. Yours. He guided his horse through a break in the rails. Nearly a mile yet, but this land borders mine. The terrain opened into a wide valley, dotted with aspen and pale boulders. A structure came into view halfway down the slope, low-roofed, with a lean-to off the side. The boards were dark with age, the shingles new in patches. Persephone drew up beside him and studied the house. You patched that roof yourself? Last autumn. Got tired of waking up to puddles. She dismounted without waiting for help, her boots crunching over gravel. Built solid. Most of it was already standing when I bought it, Gareth said. I just try to keep it holding together. She walked toward the porch, trailing her fingers over the rail. The bell above the gate let out a dull clang as the wind caught it. She turned toward the sound, then looked back over her shoulder. You weren't lying. Not in the habit. Inside, the air held a faint scent of pine pitch and old soap. A wood stove stood in the corner, the stovepipe patched neatly with tin. The table near the window was worn smooth in the center. Persephone moved through the room slowly, not touching anything.
There's a room on the end, Gareth said.
Used to be for the ranch hand. Bed's clean. Window faces east. She nodded once, then stepped through the doorway he pointed to. He watched her disappear inside, her steps quiet on the floorboards. After a moment, he turned and began unpacking supplies: beans, cornmeal, the last of the coffee. He stoked the stove and set water to boil. By the time she returned, she had washed her face and rebraided her hair. She didn't offer a remark, and he didn't ask. She picked up a small tin box from the shelf and opened it, revealing a mess of nails, screws, and bent hinges. You keep these sorted? I try. But the coffee tin's for square nails only. She separated out a handful, then set the tin back. You got a hammer? In the lean-to. You planning to fix something? That back fence is half-rotted. We'll lose calves come spring if you don't get it mended. Gareth raised an eyebrow. You saying you're staying that long? I'm saying I don't walk away from work that needs doing. She took the hammer from the wall and headed back outside. Gareth stood for a moment, the sound of her steps carrying down the porch boards, then followed. She was already at the fence line, testing posts for rot. Gareth picked up a spare rail and brought it over. They worked without speaking, her with a quiet focus, him matching her pace without crowding. When the sun dipped low, he wiped his brow with his sleeve. "You swing a hammer like you've done it all your life." "I was hammering nails before I could write my own name," she said, then paused. "I taught myself letters from a feed catalog." He leaned against the fence. "You read much?" "Only when I could trade for pages. I had a copy of Pilgrim's Progress once. Pages fell out one by one. I kept the last one folded in my shoe." "What did it say?" She looked up. "That there's a place beyond the river, where sorrow ends." Neither of them spoke for a long while. That night, supper was quiet. Gareth watched her across the table, noting the way she moved, now still deliberate, but no longer brittle. After they ate, she helped wash the dishes, sleeves pushed back, hair falling forward as she scrubbed the tin plates. He dried them without comment, then set them on the shelf. When the last of the firewood was stacked near the stove, she turned to him. "That lean to need fixing too?" "The roof leaks if the rain's hard," he admitted. "I'll start tomorrow." "You don't have to earn your keep." She met his eyes then, steady as stone. "I want to." He gave a small nod. "All right." Outside, the wind stirred through the trees, soft and restless. Persephone stood near the door, one hand on the frame. "I don't know what this is yet," she said. "This place, you, me, but something in me. Don't feel hollow today." He stepped closer, his voice low. "You don't have to name it. Just stay." She didn't move for a long breath. Then she stepped forward and he didn't reach for her, but he didn't step back either. When she finally spoke again, it was barely above a whisper. "I think I will." By the third morning, the rhythm between them had settled into something unspoken but steady. Gareth rose early to tend the horses, while Persephone stepped out barefoot to gather pine kindling. They passed each other without many words, but the space between them had changed to no longer careful, just quiet. She'd found an old spokeshave in the shed with a nicked blade and spent the morning sharpening it with a whetstone she'd uncovered beneath the stairs. By midday, she was shaping new handles for the broken tools stacked behind the barn, sleeves rolled high, sawdust clinging to her forearms. Gareth watched from the porch, the corner of his jaw tight with thought. He stepped down when the sun reached its highest, wiping his hands on a rag. "You ever think about heading back east?" he asked. She didn't look up. "No reason there." "Not even family?" "None that would set a place for me." He folded the rag slowly. "Would you want to, if things were different?" Persephone paused her work. "If I had a brother still living, maybe. But folks like me weren't made to belong to towns with polished windows and church bells." He nodded. "Same." They didn't speak again until dusk, when she set the finished handles in a wooden crate and carried it to the porch. He opened the door for her without needing to be asked. Inside, he ladled stew into 2 bowls. She sat across from him at the table, her hair still damp from washing, the scent of juniper lingering faintly. She leaned back after the first few bites, resting her spoon. "You've got a good hand with dried beans." He shrugged. "I've learned how not to ruin them." She looked toward the window. "Saw a pair of quail near the woodpile. I could trap one tomorrow if you've got wire." "I'll show you where I keep it." After a long pause, she asked, "What did you do before the ranch?" "Drove cattle north to the railheads. Kansas mostly. Spent winters sleeping under wagons." "How many years?" 6. "Then I got tired of other men's tempers and long roads that led nowhere." She traced the rim of her bowl with one finger. "I didn't think anyone ever chose to stop. Just figured they got too worn out to go on." "I chose it," he said. "Didn't know what I was choosing, but I knew what I was leaving behind." She looked up then, and he saw something settle behind her eyes. Not ease, but the start of it. Later, she stood outside beneath the porch eave, combing her fingers through her hair. The wind moved slow through the trees, carrying the smell of cold pine and distant rain. He stepped out beside her, arms folded. "Storm might pass close tonight. She nodded. I've always liked the sound of it. Makes a person feel small in a way that doesn't hurt. Gareth watched her as she turned her face toward the clouds. You have a way of saying things that stay with a man. I've had to live inside my own head plenty. Might as well put the words to use. He cleared his throat. You've done more than I expected, you know. With the fence, the tools. Her voice was even. I needed something to put my hands to, and your place needed seeing to. He hesitated, then said, I was thinking there's a stretch of pasture behind the ridge I've never cleared. Too rocky for cattle, but good for planting. If you ever had a mind to grow something again. She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, I used to keep a row of onions behind our smokehouse. They were the first thing I ever grew that didn't die. You'd be welcome to plant here. His voice was quiet. Whatever you wanted. She turned to look at him, eyes unreadable in the dim light. You're offering more than dirt, aren't you? I'm offering what I have. A place that won't be taken from you. A life that's steady, if plain. Her gaze searched his face. I'm not soft, Gareth. I don't know how to be someone easy. I'm not asking for easy. The wind stirred again, carrying the first scent of rain. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint line of a scar along her cheekbone, one that hadn't caught his eye before. She said, If I stay, it won't be just for shelter. I know. She reached out then, not to take his hand, but to rest her palm flat against his chest, just over the place his heartbeat met her fingers. He stood still as stone, but his breath left him slow and full. She said, I want to see what else grows here. He nodded once. With you, it will be more than onions. And for the first time, she smiled in a way that reached her eyes. By early spring, the high ridge behind Gareth's ranch had softened under the warming rains, and the stubborn freeze that clung to the shaded slopes had finally receded. Persephone stood at the edge of the clearing, her skirt hemmed damp with dew, a sack of onion sets cradled in one arm. Gareth approached with a spade across his shoulder and a coil of hemp rope in his free hand. She nodded toward the ridge. I marked out a line with stones. If we plant east to west, they'll catch the sun as it moves. He set the spade down and studied the layout. You think like someone who's done this before. I spent 2 long coaxing sprouts from clay and dust, she said, kneeling to loosen the soil. Now that I've got something with promise, I intend to see it through. He tied off the rope between 2 stakes, letting it guide the row. You always plan this exact. I don't gamble with things that need growing. They worked in tandem, quiet but attuned. When her elbow brushed his, she didn't move away. The rhythm of planting had become theirs, measured, deliberate, with pauses only for water or breath. When the last set was buried, she wiped her hands on her apron and looked up. I've been thinking about adding a second row. Tomatoes, maybe. You'll need stakes and twine. I saw some cedar scrap behind the barn. I can cut it down. You don't have to do all of it alone. She glanced at him. I know. It's just. Taking help still feels like walking barefoot through thorns. You've walked through worse. She looked down at her hands. I've been carving out a life since I was 15. Never thought it would lead me here. He stepped closer, his voice low. Here's not a bad place to end up. Her eyes lifted to his, and whatever hesitation had shadowed her before was gone now. When I first saw this place, I didn't know what to make of it. You either. And now, I think I've been waiting for something steady for so long, I forgot what it felt like to stand still. He raised her hand to his chest, resting it over his heart. Then let's not move unless we choose to. She leaned into him without needing to be pulled, her cheek against his collarbone, breath even. He held her there, not with urgency, but with the quiet certainty of someone who'd found what he didn't know he was looking for. That evening, she brought out a small wooden box she'd kept wrapped in cloth since the day she arrived. She set it on the table and opened it, revealing a folded piece of paper and a pair of small, hand-carved toys. "I made these for Samuel and Sadie before winter," she said. "I never got the chance to give them." Gareth waited. "I don't know where they are now, or if they even remember me, but I want to plant something for them. Not to replace, just to honor." He reached across the table and laid his hand over hers. "We can build something here that carries their names forward, if that's what you want." She nodded, tears unshed but no longer sharp. "A willow between the rows. Something that bends, but doesn't break. We'll plant it first thing tomorrow." That night, she didn't return to the small room at the end of the house. Instead, she stayed beside him in the main room, her head on his shoulder as the fire dimmed. No words were needed. His arm curled around her waist like it belonged there. By summer, the pasture had changed. The onions stood tall, the tomatoes clung to their stakes, and a willow sapling grew in the center, its leaves whispering in the breeze. Persephone spent her mornings in the garden and her afternoons sanding reclaimed wood into usable form. Gareth repaired the old corral, his eyes often drifting toward the ridge where she moved. One morning, she handed him a folded sheet of paper. "Got word from a woman who took them. Samuel and Sadie. She wrote from a boarding house in Flagstaff. Said they're healthy. Said they ask about me." He read the note, then handed it back. "You want to go?" "I did," she said, "until I realized I wouldn't be coming back just to visit. I'd be coming back home." He took her face in his hands. "This is your home. With me." "I know." Her voice caught. "And when they're old enough, I'll send for them, if they want it. We'll make room." They married beneath the willow that fall, with no preacher but a witness from town and the wind in the branches. She wore a dress she'd sewn from muslin and lace salvaged from an old trunk. He wore his father's vest, brushed clean and mended at the seams. Afterward, they sat on the porch, her feet tucked beneath her, his hand resting over hers. "I never thought I'd have another name," she said. "You don't have to. I want yours. Not because I need it, because I choose it." He kissed her hand. "Then it's yours." They grew older with the seasons side by side. The soil stayed generous, and the house stayed warm. When the children came to visit, Persephone greeted them with arms that had never stopped aching, and they stayed long enough to see what she'd built from grief. And every year, just as the onions pushed through the thawed earth, she and Gareth walked the rows together, their hands brushing as they passed the willow that had bent, but never broken. They never left. They never needed to. Everything they had was already in bloom.